live at 10 to promptly, and I'll let you know when that started.
Yeah. Right, okay then, thank you.
The second live stream is now live now, Chairman.
Right, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's session of the Western Area Planning Committee. Item 4.6 is the next one on the agenda, and that's PA 20/03739 St Clements Hill Limited, Little Hendra, Buscaris Road, Carbis Bay. And I think Chantal, you're taking us through that one?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'll just share my presentation with you.
Okay, we can hear you. We'll just check your screen.
Bear with me 1 second.
Yep, we can see it. So when you're ready, Chantal.
Okay, thank you. So members will recall just before lunch, you debated an application on this site. So you need to be mindful of the previous decision. But this application is a full application for the demolition of existing dwelling and redevelopment of the site to provide 7 new dwellings and 1 replacement dwelling. So the key issues are the design and visual impact upon the character and appearance of the area and residential amenity. The site outlined in red lies within a residential area of Carbis Bay. The site was previously occupied by the dwelling known as Little Hendra, which lies within the centre of the site and surrounded by a large garden. The property has been demolished following planning permission being allowed at appeal for the demolition and erection of 7 dwellings and 1 replacement dwelling. And that's the fallback position. To put the site into context, here's an aerial view. You can see house types and density varies within the area. So turning to the plans, this shows the proposed site layout. As I said, the principle of 8 dwellings on this site has been established. However, this proposal now proposes 4 dwellings to the front of the site and 4 dwellings to the rear. In terms of the design, plots 1 to 4 at the rear of the site are proposed to be 3-storey, responding to the steepness of the site. And then plots 5 to 8 are proposed to be 2-storey to the south and 3-storey to the north. Whilst it was acknowledged the dwellings would be higher than the previously allowed dwellings on appeal, it was considered within my officer report that they would not be prominent or harmful to the visual amenity. This slide shows the proposed sections and the separation distance from neighbouring properties. From Hendra's Park, it ranges between 21.7 to 25.5 metres. And due to the separation distance and the positioning of openings, it was considered refusal could not be warranted on the grounds of the detriment to the residential amenity. And I'll just quickly run through the photos again. So this is stood on the site looking towards the rear of the neighbouring properties at Hendra's Park. This is looking towards the southeast, the neighbouring property known as the Sands. Then the view looking towards the west of Buscaris Crescent. View looking towards the north of the rear of the properties known as Sand Sifters. And then this is the entrance to the site. So in conclusion, planning permission has previously been allowed on appeal for 8 dwellings on this site. This appeal decision is a fallback position that carries significant weight. Whilst the various concerns for local residents and St Ives Town Council are noted and understood, it's considered the proposal would not cause any material harm to the character of the area or detrimental harm to the residential amenity. But as I said previously at the start of this meeting, you do just need to be aware of what you previously refused on Section 73. The application, however, was recommended for conditional approval. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chantal. We have got an objector, and I think it's Mr. Peter Hendry again. Can you hear me, Mr. Hendry?
Oh, yes, I can hear you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we can hear you. So it'll be the same format as last time. It will be 3 minutes. You'll get a prompt at 30 seconds, and your time will start when you start speaking.
Right. Good morning again, and thank you for your time. Mr. Chairman, I'm here as a representative of the many people who are opposed to this sequential planning application, applying for yet more extensive development on the Little Hendra site. There have been approximately 60 objections over 3 years now, giving some idea of the level of local concerns. The speech I'm telling you now may sound familiar because it was similarly given in September 2019. For the PA 02818, and the reason for refusal was it didn't integrate with the surrounding context or policies GD1, 12, B12 and B17. The idea that these proposals would not cause any material harm to the character of the area or detrimental harm to the residential amenity is quite wrong. Item 4 on page 159 says it doesn't, but it does. These proposals are in conflict with these policies very substantially. Items 16 and 17 on page 162. The idea that these proposals are sensitive surroundings, no, they are not. Item 27 on page 141, they are not. They will have a significant adverse impact, but this surprisingly is not even mentioned in the agenda item. Also, the housing density measurements claimed by the applicants are not comparable because they take into account blocks of flats, which make their average figures look far better than they really are. This proposal will not have any positive contribution to open spaces. One other thing, we logged our concerns with St Ives Town Council referencing neighbourhood development plan issues, and these have been rejected on 3 separate occasions now in the strongest possible terms. I would also like to add the material and powerful reason for not granting this 3-storey development. It is the full-time principal residence housing objective, as well as the user policy restriction H2. These require all new buildings to be occupied only as principal or residences of persons entitled to occupy. For these buildings to comply with this, they would need to be able to be afforded by local residents. One cannot see how building larger properties than the ones already consented could sensibly be expected to achieve this. They would instead be most likely to cause an increase in the currently excessive breachings of the planning policy restrictions. New planning applications needing to comply with the full-time principal residence objective, as well as the user policy restriction H2, should be designed and be of a suitable size and price. Otherwise, such properties would be most unlikely to be bought by local owner families.
That's 3 minutes, Chairman.
Right, that's time, Mr. Hendry. If you could just wait, just in case we've got some questions for you. David, are there any questions?
No, Chairman.
No, right. Right, thank you very much for attending again this afternoon, Mr. Hendry. We now go on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Rita Late, again from St Ives Town Council. Can you hear me, Councillor Late?
I can, and I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
That's great.
I'm sure you're aware of the format, but I've got to repeat it. It's 3 minutes, you get a prompt at 30 seconds, and your time will start when you start speaking. So over to you, Councillor Late.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors. I'm not going to waste a lot of time by repeating what I said before, but this application is just another variation on a theme for the same number of dwellings, i.e. 8 dwellings, but in yet another configuration of the layout. I think these repeated applications with the various changes are just designed to confuse. As for the application you discussed before your lunch break, this plan also amounts to a larger development and thus would have more impact than the earlier application, which was allowed at appeal. The layout for this particular application has 2 pairs of semis just inside the entrance and a line of 4 detached 3-storey dwellings at the top. No matter which configuration there is for the site plan, 3-storey dwellings will have a greater impact on neighbours than was the lower level development of 2-storey dwellings that was allowed at appeal. So, as for the previous item, I ask for you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Late. Are there any questions for Councillor Late, David?
No, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon's meeting, Councillor Late. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding.
Right. And now there's nobody from the applicant, so we go on to the divisional member, which is Councillor Linda Taylor. Can you hear me, Linda?
Yes, I can, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So, over to you.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee for the decision that they made on the very last application, and that in itself is an indication as to why this application cannot be supported. It is the general layout is of huge scale, and there is a fallback position, and that is the one that has the applicant already has a planning permission for. So I won't waste your time. I will just ask you to strongly recommend that this application is not supported, and it's purely based on all the reasons that you actually gave for the last application, but bearing in mind this is of a much more intrusive and larger scale. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Linda. Are there any questions for Linda? David?
No, Chairman.
Right, thank you. So with that, we go to, are there any questions for officers?
Not yet, Chair. No.
No?
No.
Right, so we go into committee and we'll open it up for debate and hopefully a recommendation. Have you got any takers, David?
Not yet. It's like Graham Code's thinking about Graham Code.
I don't think this meeting's
Right,
never,
over to you, Graham.
it's never going to end, is it? I object purely and simply on the single issue of the 3-storey buildings in this proposal, and I would propose objection on that basis, that they're overbearing, too big, etc.
Yeah, right. So is there a seconder for that?
I've got Sue Nicholas and John Martin have got their hands up.
Yeah. Sue, do you want to second it, or did you want to speak?
Yeah,
or
I'm
do
quite
both?
happy to second it on basically the same reasons that we gave on the last one. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. John Martin.
Yes, I was just about to second it. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay then. Right. Are there any further comments, or are you happy to put it to vote?
John Simmons has got his hand up, Chair.
Yeah. Yeah. John.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. I was too slow in putting my hand up to second it, and too slow to take it down. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we need to go to Mr. Broomhead just to check on the reasons for refusal. What his advice would be. Mark, could you help us on that one, please?
Yeah. I'm assuming from what I can gather from the proposal and seconder that it was the same reasons as the previous application, which I can read out again if you want me to, Chairman.
I think that'd be helpful.
Okay. The overall scale of the development is considered to be unacceptable as it would fail to integrate successfully with the surrounding context and would be detrimental to the character of the area. The proposal would fail to reflect local distinctiveness, nor would it integrate satisfactorily with the built environment. The site in mass and scale would unacceptably impair the outlook from within the rear facing rooms and gardens of the occupiers of Buscaris Crescent and Hendris Park. Proposals in conflict with policies GD1, BE12 and BE17 of the St Ives Neighbourhood Plan, policies 1, 2 and 12 of the Cornwall Local Plan, and paragraphs 8, 127, 130 and 131 on the MPPF 219.
Thank you. Graham and Sue, are you happy with that?
Happy with that. Thank you, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. David, have we got any further speakers?
No.
Right. So we'll put that one to the vote. So it'll be against the officer's recommendation. It will be for refusal on the grounds that's been read out by Mr. Broomhead. It's been proposed by Councillor Code and seconded by Councillor Nicholas. So over to Angela for the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Baston.
For.
Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Code.
For.
Councillor Eakin-Smith.
For.
Councillor Harding.
For.
Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Kaczmarek.
4.
Martin,
4.
Councillor Nicholas,
4.
Councillor Pascoe,
4.
Councillor Simmons,
4.
and Councillor John Thomas.
4.
And that's been unanimously refused.
Right, thank you. Right, for the next item 4.7, I revert to the role of a divisional member, and so I'll hand the chair over to the vice chairman. Over to you, David.
There we are. Get a chance to put my picture up on the screen. Thank you, Chair. So we're looking at item 4.7, which is PA 21/00101. Mr. Seibert, additional plot adjacent to 46 Gurnick Road, Newlyn, on pages 178 to 188 of your papers. I think it's Adam doing this, is it?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. I'll just share my screen and try not have a faux pas again.
And away you go.
Okay, can you see the presentation, Vice Chair?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, great. So this is an application for approval of reserved matters following outline approval PA 17 in respect of the northernmost plot at Gurnick Road in Newlyn. So the key issues are whether the design of the proposed dwelling is suitable in this location, whether the proposal will give rise to unacceptable overlooking impacts upon neighbouring residential property. It's important to emphasise, as set out in the report, that this is an identical application to the next one on the agenda, which the applicant is appealing the non-determination of. However, should members be inclined to approve the current application now before you, the agent has confirmed that the appeal in respect of the next application would be withdrawn. So just bear that in mind here. This one and the next one are identical. So as you can see, the site is situated in the Newlyn urban area towards its western end. Moving in a bit closer, you can see the site here. The green land beneath the red area, that's also part of the site, but it's plots, additional plots that aren't up for consideration today. We're just looking at the northernmost plot, which has been previously known as plot 50. And here's an aerial photograph of the site as existing, or as relatively recently anyway. So this is the proposed site plan. As you can see, it's well, can't get too much of an idea from this, but basically it's a single-storey dwelling split over 2 levels, which transitions the sloping site. Access from Gurnick Road to the west and Tredavo Lane is to the east on considerably lower ground, as you'll see from the photograph shortly. These are the proposed elevations. So top left is east facing Tredavo Lane, bottom left is west facing onto Gurnick Road, and then north and south as well. These are the existing and proposed sections. So the top section is looking from Tredavo Lane in a westerly direction. The next one is the site section looking northward. So as you can see on the left, you've got properties on Gurnick Road, right, Tredavo Lane. You can see the outline of a property on Tredavo Lane down there. That really demonstrates how the site would transition the sloping nature. The dwelling would transition the sloping nature of the site rather. And the bottom one is just an existing section showing the land. Internal floor plans and sections now. So the lower ground floor obviously is proportionately smaller than the ground floor itself, owing to the design of the dwelling. And there's an internal section at the top just showing how it would work in terms of head heights. Now, it's important to emphasise that there has been an approval of reserved matters for a single dwelling on this plot. That is shown by the left-hand images here with the 5 roof lights. The current application before you is on the right-hand side. The main changes being the addition of a large dormer window and some further roof lights. It's a dormer window on this proposed dwelling that's causing much of the objection and as one of the main reasons for it being called to committee today in terms of overlooking. So on some photographs, I've included here some photographs that a neighbour kindly provided before. The one on the left-hand side demonstrates that the site was once considerably lower before being made up following the development of the dwellings at Gurnick Road. So just a bit of a history exercise here, just to kind of give you some information about the history of the site. These are previous photographs I've taken from within the site. So top left is looking north, top right is looking west towards the Gurnick Road properties. Bottom left is looking south, and then bottom right is looking east towards Tredavo Lane. So you can get the impression about how the land steeply falls away to this aspect. But here are some current views I took towards the end of last year. I wasn't able to get into the site because of the fencing, but you can see that some works have been undertaken onto the site, some land movements, so on and so forth. And here are some recent photographs I took from Tredavo Lane showing the land movement as well. Yeah, just give you a flavour for what it looks like at the moment and how it relates to Tredavo Lane. And finally, here are some photographs of a property called Roseveen, which is situated along Tredavo Lane, considerably lower down. You can see here, well, top left, well, all of them in fact, its elevations facing onto Tredavo Lane. Residents of this property are particularly concerned that they would be subjected to unacceptable overlooking from the dwelling, or the new dwelling that is. So the concerns about the revised design and its impact upon the amenities of the dwellings along Tredavo Lane are understood. However, we consider the design as acceptable in this area containing a range of building types, and we don't consider the extent of overlooking from the dormer window would be so harmful to warrant refusal of the application. So the recommendation is for conditional approval. I'll draw members' attention to an update, which well, I haven't got it in front of me here, but the update basically confirms that we had a further representation of objections submitted by one of the neighbours, basically reiterating points he's made before, and which have been addressed in the report. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Right, we have speakers. End of the objections. We have Mr. Peter Sorden. Can you hear me, Mr. Sorden?
Correct.
We can hear you loud and clear. You'll have 3 minutes as the normal way to speak, and you will be advised when you've got 30 seconds left, and that's from when you start. So over to you.
Good afternoon. I am Peter Sorden. My wife and I live at Gurnick Field. Mr. Burt's plot 50 is on the opposite side of Tredavo Lane. There are 4 crucial issues. Firstly, it is important to remember planning history, particularly PA 18/06395. After local consultation with concerned property owners, Mr. Burt submitted a 7th and final set of plans. Planning permission was granted in March 2020 for the building footprint and basic property shape that appears in this current application. Secondly, amongst other changes, what is now proposed is a substantial dormer window and 5 high-level Velux windows for the east elevation long sloping roof. In simple terms, Mr. Burt is trying to amend what had previously been agreed locally. Please note that no local consultation has been offered this time. Thirdly, discussions with Mr. Burt prior to the 2018 application being approved were on the basis that the site would revert to the natural ground level. That's to say, all the dumped spoil, refuse and soil would be removed. In January, a digger removed some of the made-up ground, but not all. The new ground level at the eastern boundary is at wall height. I repeat, at wall height. During the January and February substantial rains, there was overspill onto Tredavo Lane. Immediate neighbours at Roseveen are quite rightly concerned about potential flooding. Fourthly, our letter of the 25th of January fully detailed our strong objections. I do not propose mentioning all of these, but of principal concern are: A, the 2018 planning approval placed understandable restrictions on any additional building alterations, including enlargement and the roof. Mr. Burt is now asking for these constraints to be released. There will be overlooking from the mass. There will be overlooking from the mast and height of the large dormer window. This will produce a loss of privacy and outside amenities for surrounding properties, particularly Roseveen and Truens, which are downhill to the east. Finally, the benefit for Mr. Burt are far outweighed by the impact on neighbours. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Sorden. If you could hang on for a minute, see if there are any questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Sorden, please? Thornton. I can't see any, so in that case, thank you very much for attending this afternoon, Mr. Sorden. We have nobody under the Parish Council rep column, so we move on to the applicant, Mr. John Pender. Can you hear me, Mr. Pender?
Chairman, Rowena Brednam, meeting producer. If Mr. Pender could press *6 to unmute his telephone. I had to mute him because there was some background noise.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Pender.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pender, and thanks for coming along. You will have 3 minutes to make your statement, and you will be advised when you've got 30 seconds left. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm not the applicant, but I am speaking on the applicant's behalf. The agent's unfortunately been taken ill, so I've been asked instead to speak. Your report recommending approval assesses in detail the 2 determining issues, so I'll just emphasise the key points. Outline permission exists for houses on this and the neighbouring 2 plots to complete the development of this cul-de-sac on a modern estate. There's a variety of buildings, houses as well as bungalows, existing and approved in this cul-de-sac as well as elsewhere on the estate. The current Reserved Matters application proposes a revised design from the detailed one submitted in 2018 and approved a year ago. It follows another amended design application that was refused only for visual reasons, and as paragraph 14 of your report explains, it's been scaled back so that it's now very similar to the approved design. The main change is described in B, a dormer contained within the rear roof slope. Visually, the current revised design isn't materially different from the details that have been accepted. It's certainly not more overbearing, having the same roof ridge and eaves heights and the same footprint. The current revised design also doesn't appreciably increase overlooking compared with the house accepted here in a built-up location where some mutual overlooking is characteristic. Your report goes into this in more detail and the applicant goes along with that. Please can you therefore approve this modified house design as recommended? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pender. If you could wait a second, are there any questions for Mr. Pender? I don't see any, so thank you very much for attending, Mr. Pender.
Thank you.
We now move to the divisional member, who is Councillor Roger Harding. Can you hear me, Roger? I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't need telling this, but
no, I'll do my best. Thank you, Chairman. The first comment that I want to make is that this this site has been around for a long time, and there's never ever been any objection to development on it. On reading the agenda, I think what most of the residents, and I share their view, that when you go to item 3, it's what it doesn't tell the members that is the important bit. And one of the things it skirts over is the history. This site has been around for a number of years, and it was original Cornwall Council one where they just drew a red line around an area, and that was the development area. At that time, it was clearly stated that the proposed development in that part of the site would be bungalows. The site goes downhill, so it was proposed that the bungalows would mirror the hill and they'd be stepped down the hill. Two things, that this would overcome any sort of overlooking of Tredavo Lane, the residents of Tredavo Lane, and also it would be below the skyline when you look from the conservation area. Subsequently, this was used as the compound, and it was a rather large estate development, and gradually over the years the height of the compound gradually rose. It almost grew in tandem with the trees. So when we started out, there was a hedge that you could stand and look over into Tredavo Lane. Now, as you've seen from photographs that were shown earlier, you tower over Tredavo Lane with the site. this went through the various stages of planning. It came up to outline. Outline went through on delegated powers with a proviso that it should be bungalows, and the bungalows envisaged is the ones that are shown on the west elevation, which is on the screen at the moment. That was the style of bungalow that was envisaged there. But basically we ended up where we are, and we came to the application in 2018, where members are encouraged to negotiate and encourage residents and the developer to get together and trying to sort of come to a compromise situation for a development. Although it was considerably, the ground level was considerably higher than was envisaged, and the style of bungalow was completely different, there was a reasonable compromise. The residents accepted a much different building to what was in the area on much higher ground, and basically on the east side consideration was given in the design to the residents in Tredavo Lane. Basically you can imagine the surprise of the residents when they're faced with a proposal that we are faced with today. If we look at the report, the main objection to the residents is not NIMBYs. They've accepted a more modern style of development, which is much higher than was originally envisaged. But if you go to page 184, and really it's B that is the problem in this one, and it's where the residents feel that it's sort of the sort of additions should be refused. We've got the fallback situation as we had in the earlier ones that were passed in 2019 from a 2018 application. But the other thing which the report doesn't tell us, that normally I don't know whether it's a guideline or a policy, but the distance between residents should be residential properties should be 21 metres. In the report it tells us this one is about 19 metres. I don't know whether it's just over or just under, but with the raised elevation and the bulk and the scale of this building, it is sort of much more dominating than a smaller bungalow would have been. And really, if we come back to I'm quite sure Mr. Broomhead would probably agree that there are grounds for refusal on this one. It would be the scale and the dominating position of this one, and the high proportion of glass, and the fact that it is less than the usually accepted 21 metres. It has a dominating effect on the land to the east, and it's a unacceptable loss of the outdoor amenities and loss of privacy to the residents of Tredavo Lane. And basically I know they'll say we've got to consider the application that you've got before you, but if you pass this one, you can be rest assured that at a later date there'll be one identical to it, and you'll be referred to this one, having passed this one, that you've got to accept the other one. What I'd ask members to do is to refuse this, and an appeal is already lodged on the next application, and whereas we've got the opinion of one officer, which is a subjective opinion, it is contrary to several residents in the area, the local town council and my own. So I respectfully ask members to refuse this one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Are there any questions for Councillor Harding? No, I don't see any. So are there any questions for officers? Anybody out there? Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Just a couple of queries really. The very large dormer window that's been put in, within these plans, is it a reverse living? Thank you. So that was one question, and the other one is, because it's on built up ground, I do notice with concern that it is towering over the existing lane wall. Have you got any comments to make on that?
I think if Adam puts the photos up of the site from Tradavo Lane, might help members make a judgment on that. That's the some of the made up ground. Obviously, it's been moved around more recently.
Is it worth me pulling up the proposed section again as well? Which
yeah, please.
So it's the middle one there. So basically, yeah, like I said in the presentation, if you look at the middle section in particular, you can see faintly on the right hand side is Rosevine, which is on Tradavo Lane. Then to the left hand side is a existing bungalow on Gurnick Road. So you can see how the built massing falls down the slope in relation to Tradavo Lane. So yeah, I guess it's inevitably going to be slightly higher, but we feel that with the design amendments as approved and as proposed, they would mitigate any adverse impact.
But that is very dominant against the other one, the faint one. Is it Rosevine?
That's Rosevine, that's correct.
Lovely, thank you.
And thank you, sir. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Any comments from the officers? No. In which case we'll move into the debate. I look for speakers in the debate. Don't see anybody. Councillor Nicholas. Good job you're there.
I was going to say, I'm trying to change my background on this, but it's not working. Yeah, I mean, I just think that this is overbearing. I think it's in a prominent position, and I would have grave concerns about the stability of the wall, the lane wall, and also the runoff from that, because I know that how steep that area is. I've also got grave concerns about a very large dormer window that would be overlooking the neighbours. And certainly if that was going ahead, I would expect some obscure glazing in it. But I do think it's overbearing on the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor John Thomas.
Yes, I tend to share the concerns of Councillor Nicholas as chairman. And yeah, I would second the motion if she's proposing refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Happy to do that, Chairman.
Any other comments anybody wants to make on this before we go to a vote? Doesn't look like it, so over to you, Angela, for the vote.
No, Chairman, can I come in with?
Sorry, Mr. Greenwood. Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Clarify the reason.
Good idea.
You mentioned the large scale and the high proportion of glazing. There was mention of within 21 metres and overlooking and loss of privacy. And if you're going down that route, I can give you firmer detail. And obviously there is some planting, but obviously that may take some time to not overcome it. So if that's your reason, I can give you the full detail reason.
I should go ahead, I think, Chair.
Is that? I'll ask the proposer and seconder.
I would accept that, Mr. Brumhead.
Okay, if I read out a reason, if as I've understood it, and correct me if I got it wrong, and there was complete reference to property Rosevine, which is the one at the lower end, who actually sit out in that courtyard at times, apparently. By reason of its large scale with a high proportion of glazing, coupled with its positioning well within 21 metres of neighbouring residential property on considerably lower ground to the east, Rosevine, the proposed dormer window is going to give rise to unacceptably overlooking loss of privacy impacts upon the said property, notably to its outside space to this aspect which the present occupiers enjoy sitting in. Whilst the proposal includes some mitigating planting along the eastern boundary of the site, as demonstrated on, there is a drawing number 420/05H revision D. This is likely to take several years to establish fully and thus is not considered to overcome the unacceptable harm identified. The proposal is therefore considered to be in conflict with the aims and intentions of policy 12 of the Cornwall local plan, paragraph 127 of the MPPF 219 and the Cornwall design guide.
Thank you, Mark. Are you happy with that, Councillor Nicholas?
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, likewise, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, so we will now go to the vote on the as outlined by Mr. Broomhead. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you. Councillor Bastin.
For.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Code.
Against.
Councillor Eakin-Smith.
For.
Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Kaczmarek.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Nicholas.
For.
Councillor Pascoe.
For.
Councillor Simmons.
For.
John Thomas.
For.
I'll just count that up quickly. I can confirm that the refusal has been carried by 8 votes in favour, 3 against and no abstentions.
Thank you. So we move to last item, 4.8. PA 20/07862. Mr. C. Burt, land adjacent to number 46 Gurnick Road, Newlyn. Pages 189 to 198 on your report. I think it's you again, Adam.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. I'll just show my presentation in a minute.
Yep. Yeah, I can see it clearly.
I'll just press start. Okay, so just to repeat what I said before, this application is identical to the one that you've previously just refused. It's a minor to approve recommendation because, like I said before, the applicant has decided to appeal non-determination of the application. So, yeah, like I said, this report is identical to the previous one. I won't give any much commentary because you've seen and heard it all before, but I'll just quickly go through the slides just to refresh your memory again. So. Similar key issues before, but the main difference is it's a minor to approve recommendation because this application is being appealed in respect of non-determination. So again, yeah, there's the site in an overview, a bit closer in with the other 2 plots to the south. There's the aerial photograph, the proposed site plan, proposed elevations, existing and proposed sections, proposed internal floor plans and section. Just to cover Councillor Nicholas's point, it is reverse level accommodation for the most part, ground floor level facing eastwards. The comparison, so on the left hand side is what's been approved, the right hand side is what's been proposed, albeit now appealed, and the photographs. So the historic photographs, the ones I took in 2018, the ones I took very recently without being able to get into the site, and the ones recent again from along Tredavo Lane, and finally the ones of Roseveen. Again, the balance of considerations are exactly the same. We understand the concerns that have been raised locally and by Penzance Town Council and Councillor Harding. However, in our view, we remain of the view that design is acceptable in this area and the extent of overlooking is not so harmful to warrant refusal. So this recommendation is minded to approve. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Right, we go to speakers, and yet again, once again, it's Mr. Peter Sorden. Can you hear me, Mr. Sorden?
Confirmed.
Good. Well, as last time, you have the 3 minutes, and you'll be reminded when you've got 30 seconds remaining from when you start.
Before you start timing, a question, please. This application, the plans and references for this application appear to be no different to those submitted for item 4.7, which has just been refused. That's my view, unless you know something that I don't. I wonder if you want me to repeat what I've said for PA 2100101, which has just been refused.
Yeah.
Okay, Chairman, I'd just like to confirm that the public speaking session is not an opportunity for public speakers to ask questions. It's just they just have their speaking slot for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Joandra. Which presumably means I can't get an answer to the question, does it?
I'm quite happy for the question not to be answered, so I will bore you by going through my commentary again.
That's your right, Mr. Sorden.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. I am Peter Sorden. My wife and I live at Gurnick Field. Mr. Burt's plot 50 is on the opposite side of Tredavo Lane. There are 4 crucial issues. Firstly, it is important to remember planning history, particularly PA 18/06-395. After local consultation with concerned property owners, Mr. Burt submitted a 7th and final set of plans. Planning permission was granted in March 2020 for the building footprint and basic property shape that appears in this current application. Secondly, amongst other changes, what is now proposed is a substantial dormer window and 5 high-level Velux windows for the east elevation long sloping roof. In simple terms, Mr. Burt is trying to amend what had previously been agreed locally. Please note that no local consultation has been offered this time. Thirdly, discussions with Mr. Burt prior to the 2018 application being approved were on the basis that the site would revert to the natural ground level. That's to say, all the dumped spoil, refuse and soil would be removed. In January, a digger removed some of the made-up ground, but not all. The new ground level at the eastern boundary is at wall height. I repeat, at wall height. During the January and February substantial rains, there was overspill onto Tredavo Lane. Immediate neighbours at Rosevine are quite rightly concerned about potential flooding. Fourthly, our letter of the 25th of January fully detailed our strong objections. I do not propose mentioning all of these, but of principal concern are the 2018 planning approval placed understandable restrictions on any additional building alterations, including enlargement and the roof. Mr. Burt is now asking for these constraints to be released. B, there will be overlooking from the mass and height of the large dormer window. This will produce a loss of privacy and outside amenities for surrounding properties, particularly Rosevine and Twens, which are downhill to the east. Finally, the benefit for Mr. Burt in this application are far outweighed by the impact on neighbours. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Pender. Are there any questions for Mr. Pender?
Sorden.
Sorry, my mistake. Sorry, Mr. Sorden. My apologies. For Mr. Sorden.
Accepted.
Don't see any questions. Apologies once again, Mr. Sorden, for getting your name wrong. Thank you for accepting them. Apologies really for making you go through it all over again, but the process is we look at each application and go through the same process, so that's the reason. Thank you very much. We now move on to Mr. John Pender. Mr. Pender, can you hear me? Are you there, Mr. Pender?
Chairman, it's Angela Saunders. Oh yeah, Mr. Pender appeared to have muted himself, but he's unmuted again now.
You're there, Mr. Pender?
Yes, I am there, yes. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Pender. Once again, the same rules as last time. You will have 3 minutes to speak and be reminded when 30 seconds remaining from the time you start. Over to you.
Thank you. I won't repeat all that I said last time. I am speaking on behalf of the applicant, who is also the appellant now in this particular item. This matter now is all to do with Cornwall Council's response to the current non-determination appeal. The applicant had hoped that his latest revised design would be approved locally, which was why he put in PA 21-00101. But if the appeal is to proceed, the planning inspector will assess it by comparing the approved drawings with the current drawings. Your officers have explained in detail in their report why they see no objections to this revised scheme that's been currently put forward, and their report will form part of the inspector's papers when they come to decide that appeal. I can only say that I hope that that report is what guides you and you go along with their recommendation as Cornwall Council's response to the current non-determination appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pender. Are there any questions for Mr. Pender? No. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pender, for coming to the meeting this afternoon.
Thank you.
We now move on to the local divisional member, Councillor Roger Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't repeat what I said on the previous application, although it would refer to this application as well. I think the main issues on this are subjective. We've had our officer which says in his opinion there'll be no overlooking and no overbearing, etc. What I would counter that with is that I think I'm welcome to an opinion on a subjective matter like that. I've actually, Mr. Carline said he couldn't get on site. I've been on site a number of times, looked at it from both sides, know the site well, know it for a number of years. There's a number of local residents that said exactly the same thing, and the planning committee of Penzance Town Council said the same thing. So as I said, it is subjective. I think the right thing is to leave this to go to appeal, and appeal has been lodged. I don't think any inspector is going to say that because of the reasons that have been put forward and the local concerns, etc., that it's unreasonable for the council to go to appeal. On this one, we've got no real policy grounds or advisory grounds. The only thing we've got is that it's usually suggested that the distance between the residential properties should be 21 metres, and this one we're told is approximately 19 metres. So I'll leave it to the committee, but basically it is subjective, and I think everybody's welcomed their opinion. I respect the officer's opinion, but in this case I differ with it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Any questions for Councillor Harding? No. Any questions for the officers? Yeah, Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just trying to work out why, or has there been any discussion, I think, with the applicants regarding the built-up ground and why it hasn't gone back to the natural ground level that was approved?
Yeah, that was discussed fairly extensively, Councillor Nicholas, as part of the application for the approved dwelling. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, so it's been explored in sufficient detail, and we're happy that the approved scheme, and indeed, I guess the proposed scheme, reflects natural ground levels. The main objection here is about the design changes and the impact upon the amenities. But yeah, like I say, the ground level thing was looked at in sufficient detail previously, and that's what's led to the, well, partially what led to the approved scheme that the site has permission for.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any other questions for officers? Don't see any other questions. So if there are none, and then none of the officers want to make any other comments, I take it. No. So we'll move into the debate phase, and I look for speakers to contribute. Deathly silence. Councillor Code.
Hello then. Yeah, Mr. Deputy Chairman, thank you very much. I've listened to all this and the last one, and I don't think there's sufficient grounds to refuse this. We know this is going to appeal, and I think they're going to win, and it's going to cost us a lot of money. So I don't. My reason for saying that I want to support this is that I don't think there's anything wrong with this application, and I propose that we grant permission.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Nicholas.
Sorry, but I'm not seconding it. I think
right, no.
the grounds for refusal should be exactly the same as the one we've just discussed and arrived at on the previous application. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Well, but do we have a seconder for Councillor Code's proposal? Councillor? No, Councillor Kazmarek.
Yes, Chairman. I would second Councillor Coe's proposal. I think it makes sense, and I do believe if we don't approve it, they'll win this on appeal.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments?
Excuse me, if I can just come in.
Yes, please do.
Members, just be aware that as a committee, you've already refused this application. We can only make a minded decision, but I just wanted you to make aware that it's an identical application that you dealt with on the previous item.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Any other comments before we go to a vote? Okay, so we'll go to the vote. That is presumably when you say a minded application, Mark, what precisely do you mean? But I know what minded means, but how does that?
Yeah,
sit?
because the jurisdiction's taken out of our hands now. It's with the inspector.
Right.
We can only make a recommendation as a committee what you would have dealt with the application, how you would have determined it, whether minded to approve or refuse.
Right, so what we're voting on is the recommendation that
minded
officers are made. Minded, yeah. I hope everyone's clear about that. That's what we're voting on. Angela, for the vote, please.
Thank you. Councillor Bastin.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, I don't think we heard that one.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Code.
For.
Councillor Eakin-Smith.
Against.
Councillor Hurd.
Against.
Councillor Marek.
For.
Councillor John Martin.
Against.
Councillor Nicholas.
Against.
Councillor Pascoe.
Against.
Councillor Simmons.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
I'll just count that up. I can confirm that proposal has failed by 2 votes in favour, 9 against and no abstentions.
Thanks very much, Angela. I take it that the committee chairman is happy for me to complete the meeting, and if so, we move to item. Sorry.
We don't have anything on the table now because that fell, so we need to wait for another motion.
Right, I'm good you said that. It's been a long day. Right, Councillor Nicholas.
Happy to propose that we refuse it on the grounds that the previous application was. I think Mark
I'll second that.
All right. Did you want to say anything extra, Councillor Bastin?
That was John Hurd.
Sorry, Chairman, it's Angela. Can I just clarify who seconded that because they didn't give a name?
I think it was Councillor John Thomas.
No, it was John Hurd.
Yeah,
it was John Hurd. I did put my hand up to second, Chairman, but let John Hurd.
Yeah, if we let the chairman speak here. The second person up was Councillor John Thomas, so I'm assuming it's proposed by Councillor Nicholas, seconded by Councillor John Thomas.
Yes, without causing any argument, Chairman, yes.
Anybody else wanted to speak? John Baston got your hand up. Was that?
No, it was only to second Sue.
That was a third or a fourth, was it? Right. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. That's great. Right. So we.
Shall I read out the reason again for members?
Yes, you would, please, Councillor Broomhead.
By reason of its large scale with a high proportion of glazing, coupled with its positioning well within 21 metres of neighbouring residential property on considerable lower ground to the east, Rosevine, the proposed dormer window is considered to give rise to unacceptable overlooking loss of privacy impacts upon said dwelling. Notably, its outside space to this aspect which the present occupiers enjoy sitting in. Whilst the proposal includes some mitigating planting along the eastern boundary of the site, as demonstrated on submitted drawing number 420-05H revision D, this is likely to take several years to establish fully, and thus is not considered to overcome the unacceptable harm identified. The proposal is therefore considered to conflict with the aims and intentions of Policy 12 of the Cornwall Local Plan, paragraph 127 of the National Planning Policy Framework 219 and the Cornwall Design Guide.
Thank you, Mr. Broomhead. Okay, so we are voting to refuse on the basis that Mr. Broomhead has just outlined. Okay, Angela?
Thank you. I just say it's minded to refuse.
Minded to refuse. I'll get it right in a minute.
Councillor Baston.
For.
Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Code.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Kaczmarek.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Nicholas.
For.
Councillor Pascoe.
For.
Councillor Simmons.
For.
Councillor John Thomas.
For.
I'll just count that up. I can confirm that the vote of minded to refuse has been carried by 9 votes in favour, 2 against and no abstentions.
Thank you, Angela. So we get to item number 5, any other business the chairman considers to be emergency. The chairman hasn't informed me of any, so I presume there are none. And it really remains for me to say thank you very much for your endurance today. It's been a long meeting. Thank you to the officers for their endurance as well, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Good.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers now.
Good all.
Bye, folks. Thank you.